The Young and the Restless spoilers. Kyle Abbott has never been good at letting gun it when it comes to pride, not when it comes to power, and certainly not when it comes to betrayal. In a city like Genoa, where every choice echoes through the corridors of legacy, love, and leverage, Kyle's refusal to release the bitterness that still clings to him from his time at Glissade is threatening to redefine not only his future, but the carefully mended fabric of his present. Months have passed since his ill-fated entanglement with Audra Charles during their stint under Victor Newman's thumb, but the emotional sediment of that period has not settled. It continues to cloud Kyle's judgment, coloring his decisions with a corrosive mix of resentment and unresolved ambition. What should have been a closed chapter marked by professional regret and personal reckoning has instead turned into a ghost that haunts his every move. Because Kyle cannot forget that he was played, and worse, he still isn't sure whether the trap he thinks he set for Audra was ever truly his to control. When summer began, instead of embracing the new opportunities presented by his deepening relationship with Claire Newman or rebuilding his career in the way Jack and Diane quietly hoped, Kyle chose to dig into the past. But rather than severing ties with Audra Charles, woman at the heart of the scandal that disrupted not only his career at Glissade, but also destabilized the trust between him and Claire, re-entered the battlefield. And not subtly either. Kyle deliberately made his way to the sprawling French estate of Cain Ashby, a locale that has seen its share of secrets and schemes, with one goal in mind: to set a trap. He didn't go to reconcile. He didn't go to forgive. He went to outmaneuver, to prove something. Maybe to himself, maybe to Audra, maybe to Claire. And in doing so, he lost sight of waiter who mattered most. Claire, ever the realist cloaked in grace, had hoped Kyle would take the high road, that he would channel his disappointment and frustration into clarity, into their future. But he didn't. Instead, he took the bait Audra never stopped offering, the subtle defiance she wears like perfume, and walked straight into the replay of a game that only ever ends in mutual destruction. Audra, for her part, never apologized. She didn't shrink or retreat in the face of Kyle's accusations or schemes. She saw his arrival not as a threat, but as a challenge, a signal that he still cared enough to engage, that she still had enough gravity to keep him orbiting. Audra doesn't back down, not when cornered and not when threatened. She meets every accusation with a calculated smile and an arsenal of half-truths, convinced that if she keeps her cool long enough, the narrative will eventually bend in her favor. And perhaps in another life, another show, she might be right. But here, in the crucible of Genoa city drama, her arrogance and Kyle's wounded ego are a volatile mix. What neither of them realized, at least not until the damage was well underway, was that their reignited tension didn't just affect each other. It spilled over into Claire, into Nate Hastings, into the fragile relationships that had been barely held together by promises and progress. Claire, who had already extended more grace than most would, found herself blindsided again, first by omission, then by revelation. Nate, who had been trying to distance himself from the manipulative energy that often follows Audra, was drawn back in. Once again forced to question his place in a story he thought he'd stepped out of. For both Kyle and Audra, their decision to continue this gametous obsession with being right, with gaining the last word, revealed not only a disregard for consequences, but a deeper flaw. They still don't know how to walk away. Kyle's mistake is not just in returning to Audra, physically or emotionally, it's in believing that revenge could ever offer closure. That punishing her, or exposing her again, would somehow rewrite what already happened. The truth is, Kyle's vendetta is rooted in shame. Shame that he fell for Audra's charisma. Shame that he allowed himself to be manipulated under Victor's watch. Shame that even now, he's still reacting instead of leading. And in a painful twist of irony, the deeper he digs to prove his control, the more control he loses. Every step closer to Audra is a step away from the man Claire believed he was becoming. What's most damning is that Kyle had every reason to leave the past behind. Claire, with all her composure and strength, was offering him not just love, but redemption, a chance to redefine himself outside the Newman Abbott wars, outside of Victor's machinations, outside of the glissade fallout. But rather than invest in the future, Kyle banked on the past. His heart was still wired to conflict. His pride still bruised, his masculinity still bruised, his legacy still haunted by the notion that someone like Audra could outplay him. Audra's motivations are murkier. While Kyle seeks justice, she seeks power. She doesn't cry over spilt reputation, she bottles them and sells them later. So when Kyle showed up at Kane's estate in France with his smug intent and bitter history, she saw an opportunity. Not necessarily to rekindle, but to manipulate. To remind Kyle of what he lost. To suggest, wordlessly, that he was always a little more like her than he wants to admit. That he, too, enjoys the game. And maybe, in some cruel way, she's right. Maybe that's what haunts Claire the most. The possibility that Kyle isn't just seeking closure, but feeding a part of himself that still thrives on drama, power struggles, and the kind of lust for control that torched his previous relationships. Kane Ashby, ever the observer when drama unfolds on his grounds, offered no public commentary, but those who know Kane know that he sees everything. And what he likely saw in Kyle is something he once recognized in himself. A man on the verge of becoming the very thing he claims to despise. Kane knows the cost of letting resentment steer your decisions. He's seen where that path leads broken alliances, damaged reputations, lonely victories. If Kyle doesn't recalibrate soon, he may find himself standing in Kane's shadow, wondering how it all slipped away. Because in Genoa City, letting go isn't just hard, it's rare. People here cling to grudges like heirlooms. They resurrect feuds because closure feels too much like surrender. And for Kyle, surrendering his need to prove himself to Audra feels like weakness. But it's not. It's wisdom. It's growth. And until he accepts that, he'll remain exactly where he is now, stuck in a cycle, flailing between redemption and relapse. He can't afford that not anymore. Claire deserves more. Nate deserves clarity. And Kyle deserves a chance to live outside the trap he's built with his own hands. But that requires more than just apology. It requires silence, distance, surrender. Until Kaya is ready to stop playing the game and stop keeping Audra relevant, they will never truly win. And in Genoa City, losing everything usually starts with the illusion that you're still in control. Audra Charles has always worn confidence like armor sleek, impenetrable, seductive. But the deeper truth, the one she rarely admits even to herself, is that beneath the sharp edges and ruthless ambition lies a heart still tangled in the memory of Kyle Abbott. The man she betrayed, the man she battled, and perhaps the man who without meaning still owns a sliver of space in her soul. For all her bravado, for all her insistence that Kyle was just another casualty in her war for professional relevance, the pain of their fallout lingers in her. That's the part Nate Hastings has started to notice as subtle way her gaze shifts when Kyle's name surfaces, the defensiveness that cloaks even the most innocent comments. The restlessness in her posture when she's forced to confront the emotional residue she refuses to wash away. Who once believed he had secured something rare with Audra, something real, is now forced to grapple with a truth far more devastating than infidelity, that he might simply never be first in her heart. It's not that Audra doesn't care about Nate. In many ways, he has been the most stable, most affirming presence she's ever had. He sees the part of her no one else takes the time to see, scars left by her entanglement with Tucker McCall, the loneliness masked by dominance, the fragile hope that maybe someone, someday, would love her for who she is beneath the polish. Nate has provided not only companionship, but sanctuary. He has stood by her in moments when even Sally Spectra, her only real friend, questioned her motives. He saw light where others saw manipulation, potential where others saw liability. His devotion hasn't been loud or performative, it's been steady, dependable. Exactly what Audra claimed she never needed until she found herself relying on it more than she ever intended. But Nate is not a fool. He has sensed the shift. He can tell when a woman's heart is no longer fully in the room, when memories of a previous lover begin to inhabit the spaces meant for present commitment. The way Audra defended Kyle after the Glissade scandal, the way she minimized his faults and reframed their history, the way she seemed more hurt by Claire's involvement than she was invested in protecting her own relationships are the tells. And Nate, who has spent much of his life reading body language and calibrating emotional truth, understands now that Audra's passion may be split. It isn't just that she once loved Kyle. It's that a part of her still does. That realization stings more deeply than any betrayal, because it reduces Nate to a placeholder man loved for his loyalty, not for the fire he inspires. He wanted to be her partner, not her consolation prize. The tragedy of it all is that Audra, deep down, knows she doesn't deserve Nate. She knows that his gentleness, his patience, his grounding influences are rare gifts. She also knows that she has misused them. Rather than rising to meet the maturity Nate brought to their connection, she reverted, time and again, to the survivalist in her, the woman who schemes and seduces because it's safer than trusting. And while she thought she could compartmentalize her longing for Kyle, that she could grieve it privately while building something sustainable with Nate, emotions have a way of seeping through the cracks. Her late-night glances at Kyle's social media, her impulsive decisions to show up at the same parties, the defensiveness in her voice whenever Claire's name is mentioned. Neither of these betrayals isn't explosive, but they accumulate drip by drip until they form a flood. Nate, ever the composed professional, has not erupted. He hasn't accused or demanded. He has simply stepped back, emotionally if not physically, to reassess whether what they have is real or simply convenient. The irony is cruel. For once, Nate needs more than just friendship, more than emotional support. He needs to feel chosen. And the one woman he hoped would choose him wholeheartedly is still haunted by the man who broke her. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria Newman is nursing grief that refuses to let her breathe fully. The loss of Cole Howard is a wound too fresh, too complicated to heal with time alone. They had history, love, a daughter, and a tangle of what-ifs that now echo louder than ever. Claire's presence has been both Bob and Berdine a constant reminder of what could have been and what was lost. Victoria has tried to stay strong, tried to bury herself in work and routine, but her pain is stitched into her silences, her sharper than usual boardroom demeanor, her distance from those who love her most. And yet, even amid her mourning, something in her has softened toward Nate. Their friendship, forged in mutual respect and shared battles inside Newman Enterprises, has begun to take on a different texture. Where once they shared strategies and quiet confidences about business politics, now they share glances that linger just a beat too long, moments that feel suspended, as if waiting for permission to become something more. Victoria, usually so guarded, has begun to let herself be seen. Not the CEO, not the heiress, just a woman who has lost love and is afraid to find it again. And Nate, tired of chasing validation in a relationship built on shifting sand, has started to gravitate toward the calm, the clarity, the depth that Victoria exudes when she isn't busy protecting the Newman name. It's not an affair. Not yet. It's not even a confession. It's a connection. One born of mutual need and mutual hurt. And it poses a question neither of them is quite ready to answer. Could this be more? Sally Spectra watches all of this from the periphery. She is not enmeshed in the chaos, but she feels it like weather. Her friendship with Audra has evolved into something strange, half loyalty, half warning signal. She wants to believe Audra can choose growth. She wants to believe Nate is strong enough to walk away if he's not truly loved. And she wants to believe Victoria, who has been through so much, deserves someone who sees the woman behind the empire. But this is Genoa City, where every emotion is a landmine and every relationship is a battlefield. Nothing stays quiet for long. If Nate and Victoria grow closer, it will be noticed. If Audra realizes she's losing him, she may fight hard in it because she's ready to love him right, but because losing control is her greatest fear. And Kyle, ever the wild card, still lingers in the orbit of Audra's heart whether he admits it or not. Ultimately, the question isn't whether Nate will stay or go. It's whether Audra is capable of choosing anyone without keeping a backup plan in her back pocket. And whether Nate, who deserves someone who sees him as first choice, will finally choose himself instead. Because love in Genoa City is never simple. And when it comes to Audra, Kyle, Nate, and Victoria, the real story hasn't even begun.